Daniel 5. How many of you know the phrase, the writing is on the wall?
Yep.
Huh? What does that mean when you say to someone, well, the writing was on the wall?
Something obvious.
Something obvious, right?
Judgment's coming for you, sucker.
Well, if you want to know where the saying came from, okay,
Just kidding, guys.
you're going to see it in Daniel 5. That's where that saying came from. Okay? The writing is on the wall. So let's kind of do a quick recap. So we saw the life of Nebuchadnezzar. He ruled the Babylonian Empire for 43 years. He died. Okay? Now, we don't go through the different kings, so I want to give you kind of a... So right before verse 1 here, 23 years have passed now. So 23 years between Nebuchadnezzar dying and the story we're going to be reading. In those 23 years, I'm not going to get into the names, but there is multiple kings that came through. Okay? Multiple kings. Until this particular one. And this particular king that we're going to read about, interesting story. So the actual king that ruled Babylon at that time was not part of Nebuchadnezzar's family. He was married into the family. Well, because the Babylonian Empire rules, okay, the person that rules the kingdom needs to be of the line of Nebuchadnezzar. So the person that was ruling was in addition to that person that we're going to read about. So there is two people ruling at that time. With me? Okay. So, and it's interesting, this whole chapter covers one day. One day. October 29th, 539 BC. Why this is known? Because that's the fall of Babylon. That's when Babylon fell. No longer there is a Babylonian empire. So the whole chapter happens in one day. Okay? Now let's get a geographic understanding of that city of Babylon. Okay? So I'm going to use this. It's been a while since I used this. Okay? Don't judge my drawing. Okay? By the way, Babylon wasn't a circle, so but kind of imagine it.
Looks like a banjo.
Imagine. So this is kind of an aerial view of the city. This is important, by the way, why I'm saying this. Okay. So this is an aerial view. So in the middle here is the city. Okay. In the middle here is the city. This area here, it's the wall surrounding the city. How big is that wall? 300 feet high, 86 feet wide. Okay, think about this, so let it register. 300 feet high. This ceiling here is 10 feet.
Makes a Great Wall of China look tiny.
Exactly. 300 feet high, okay, 86 feet wide. The width of it is probably 4 times as big as this room. They had chariots that circled the wall. So the chariots actually were on the wall to protect it from above. Do you think anyone back then, now we have planes, okay? So it doesn't matter if you have 300 feet or 900 feet, you know, you can still, okay? But back then there was no planes, right? Okay. Do you think what's the chances of anybody destroying this city?
Almost zero.
Okay. What's interesting is, right in the middle of it is the Euphrates River. Okay. So the Euphrates River runs through that city. Okay. So they have an abundance of water. No issue. Which means they feel secure or unsecure?
Secure.
Okay. So they're secured. In the day we're talking about, the day that we're talking about right now, that chapter, the Medes and Persians are surrounding the city. They already destroyed the army that was left by Babylon outside. They're surrounding the city. So basically all of this wall is Medes and Persians. Okay. Now we pick up the story. So now we have an understanding of what is happening here. Now we have this amazingly dumb king that we're going to read about. Okay. And we're going to see what he's doing. Okay. So let's jump into Daniel 5. Okay, let's look at the first 3 verses. Okay, so the first 3 verses, and then we will dissect them.
Belshazzar. The king made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine in the presence of the 1,000. While he tasted the wine, Belshazzar gave the command to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the people which had been in Jerusalem, that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought the gold vessels that they had been taken from the temple of the house of God, which had been in Jerusalem. And the king and his lords, his wives and his concubines, drank from them.
And 4. Sorry.
They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze and iron, wood and stone.
So let's recap here. So the city is surrounded. And what does the king do? He throws a big old banquet. Okay? With all of his ministers and all the leaders, and he got drunk.
Very arrogant.
Okay? So he got drunk. Think about it. Okay? Do you think he thought that he can be defeated?
Nope.
So the first point here is I want you to be careful of being overconfident. Because sometimes we put our confidence in things. How many times did you put your confidence in your job, in your health, in your strengths, and it failed you? So the king here had confidence, right? It's okay to have confidence. My question is, what do you have confidence in?
Wow.
You have confidence in yourself, or do you have confidence in the God that can protect you, in the one that can provide for you? Okay? The king here had confidence only in one thing, himself, his power. Remember Nebuchadnezzar? Isn't this Babylon that I built? You know, remember? And then in the same, before he finished the sentence, boom. Okay? God is like, watch out. So here you're seeing, it's not really his son, because there is no word for a grandson. Okay? Most people say Belshazzar was his grandson. But in Hebrew and Aramaic, there is no word for grandson or grandfather. Okay? And that's why when you read in John, for example, your father Abraham, well, he's speaking to Jews that died generations after Abraham, because he's your father Abraham, because there is no really word for your great grandfather in that language. So he was Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, most people say. So the first thing is I want you to be careful of being overconfident. It doesn't matter what's happening around you, how secure you are. The minute you put your confidence in the wrong thing, God is saying there's pride here. You think you can handle it yourself. And because he loves you, many times he's going to take away what you're standing on. Because he wants you to stand on him. The rock. Okay? Then he goes, that's not enough. So he's getting drunk and he's standing in front of the people. He did something even Nebuchadnezzar himself didn't do. What did he do? What did he bring?
Took the gold from God's.
So he took all of the vessels. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar, okay, we're going to come back here, but go to 2 Kings 25.
He was a Democrat.
Go to 2 Kings 25, quickly. Okay? Kind of to understand what happened. Second Kings 25. Verse 8 and 9, 2 Kings 25, so the end of 2 Kings basically. Verses 8 and 9.
7th day of the 5th month, in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, commander of the imperial guard, an official of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. He set fire to the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem. Every important building he burned down.
Okay. So this is when he took all of those vessels, Nebuchadnezzar, of the house of God, took it to Babylon. Now Nebuchadnezzar, in all of his arrogance and pride, never took the vessels that are used in the temple for worship and used it to sacrifice to his gods, in all of his arrogance. Now this one here got drunk. He brings out the vessels. Now those vessels are meant for God's work, are meant for his service. Now he's using it as a mockery. He's mocking God and saying, what are you going to do about it? He is mocking God. Okay. Remember when Jesus in Matthew, I think 23, he gets into the temple, and what did he see?
He saw the tables being,
Right.
they were selling.
They were selling, right? What did he do?
You flipped them.
Okay. What were they doing? What were they doing there? What is called? Right. They are mocking because he goes, my house is a house of prayer, and you made it a den of thieves. Okay. So they were mocking God. They didn't care what God's commandment is. Okay. Now every time we teach the wrong thing for our benefit, we do exactly what this king just did. Every time we lead someone the wrong way on purpose for our benefit, teaching wrong doctrine, we do the same exact thing. We say, God, what are you going to do about it? He was mocking God. He was saying, God, what are you going to do about it? Now let me take it in a spiritual perspective. What is this here? Is this the vessel that God uses?
Yes.
Right. We're going to come back here, but go to 1 Thessalonians, go to the New Testament. 1 Thessalonians. If you were in the book and how to study the Bible, we're looking at that book. 1 Thessalonians 4. Verses 3 to 5. This is the will of God. That's what it starts, right? Okay? Because go ahead. Sometimes we ask what the will of God is. He's telling us.
For this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you should abstain from sexual immorality, that each of you should know how to possess his own vessel in sanctification and honor, not in passion of lust, like the Gentiles who do not know God. You go?
That's it. For this is the will of God. Your what?
Sanctification.
What does it mean to be sanctified?
Set apart.
To be set apart.
To be pure.
Okay? And he goes, why is this important? In verse 4. That each of you should know how to possess his own vessel in sanctification and honor. Why? That vessel here, I need to be sanctifying that vessel. So every time I use that vessel in immorality, what am I doing? Exactly what this king just did. I'm saying, God, I know you gave me this to honor you, but I'm going to do what I want with it. I'm doing exactly the same thing. Whenever I do this, I'm exactly taking whatever God gave me, because where the temple of the Holy Spirit lives, that vessel, and using it to mock God. To say, no, I don't care what you said. I'm going to do what I want. That's what you see here with this guy, Belshazzar. Okay? Now, he's having fun, right? He's drinking. He's enjoying. He's praising his gods. Okay? He's clearly mocking God. Remember what happened to Nebuchadnezzar, right? Before the words finished, what happened to him? Now I want you to look at verse 5 and 6.
Immediately the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, opposite the lampstand. And the king saw the hand as it wrote. Then the king's color changed, and his thoughts alarmed him. His limbs gave way, and his knees knocked together.
What happened to the king?
He was terrified.
He had a
You know, his knees are shaking, his whole demeanor changes. I mean, it's quite funny. You know, all of a sudden, guy thinks he's sitting on top of the world, you know, and then in 1 second, his knees are, you know, buckling, and he has no idea. And notice this. The Bible sometimes mentions things, and you think, well, what's the difference, okay? So he goes here, in the same hour. This is important, by the way. In the same hour, okay? The fingers of a man's hand, which means this, basically this hand. You know, so imagine a hand like this, writing. There's no rest of the arm. Okay? Okay? And he's writing where? He's writing on the plaster wall. What color is plaster?
white usually.
White. Okay? White, which means is it easy to see or hard to see?
Very easy.
And to make sure that it's not hard to see, he put it where?
By the lamp.
By the lampstand. So he goes, I want to make sure not only you, king, see what's being written on the wall. I want to make sure your thousands
Everybody.
that are drinking with you see what I'm going to do. Now, how clear is God's word? Very clear, lines. How many times God writes things and we ignore? We're not convicted. This king, maybe in the wrong way, he was fearful. He was like, what is going on here? Okay? How many times when I'm sitting with God and he speaks to me and I go on my knees and I say, Lord, forgive me. And I feel convicted. I feel, God, change me. God, do something different in my life. So here, he was terrified of what he saw. Okay? Now, let's see what he did. Okay? So, what did he do? Remember his grandfather. Okay? So, verse 7 and 8.
The king called loudly to bring in the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and astrologers. The king declared to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and shows me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom.
Okay? So he goes, whoever, he brings the same people that didn't know anything before. It keeps repeating itself, you know, going to the well, you know. Well, they didn't know before, they're not going to know now, you know. And he goes, well, you know, if you tell me, I'm going to put purple on you, which means you're going to be royalty. You're going to be royalty. And you're going to be the third person in the kingdom. And this is important, by the way, the third person. Why? Because remember what I said in the beginning? There were two people sharing the throne. Him and his father at that moment. So the person will be the third person. Okay? So he goes, that's what I'm going to do. Now, let's find out. Okay, what did they do? So go ahead and continue, Joseph.
Then King Belshazzar was greatly alarmed, and his color changed, and his lords were perplexed. The queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banqueting hall, and the queen declared, O king, live forever. Let not your thoughts alarm you or your color change.
Okay, let's stop there. So he brings up all of those wise men, as usual. They couldn't do it. They couldn't interpret what they're seeing. So he was greatly troubled. Well, we found out that he's greatly troubled. Okay. Now comes in the queen. And it looks like this queen wasn't in the party, right? So it looks like someone came in from the outside in. A lot of people say she is either Nebuchadnezzar's daughter or wife in this moment. So she comes in, she goes, don't let your heart be troubled. I know someone. At that moment, Daniel is about 80 years old. Okay? Now, we don't see Daniel right here, right? And you know, as I was reading this, the Holy Spirit really spoke to me. You know, sometimes we feel like we're forgotten. No one is noticing anything. So I'm faithful, I'm trying to honor God. No one cares. Right? How many have ever had the feeling like this? I have it many times. Like, I'm trying to, I'm doing the right thing, I'm trying to be faithful. No one notices. Okay? Isn't it interesting in all the situation that we have seen Daniel so far? He is always not in the mix of everything. And then when they are trying to fix something, who do they call him? Daniel. You know, that's exactly what's going to happen with you when you continue to be faithful. When you continue to honor God, you may think that God is not seeing what you're doing. You may think that others around you are not seeing what you're doing. But you know who's watching? God. And you know who He's going to lift up in the right moment? You. See, a lot of times we run after being recognized. We want to be recognized. That's important to us. So I want to put myself in a situation to be recognized. I want people to know who I am. And unfortunately, a lot of people do a lot of stupid things to be recognized. Okay. Why? Because you could be recognized by doing something extremely stupid.
Catch me outside.
Hey, look at me. And in this moment, no one wants to look at me. Okay? Because I'm not really doing anything that's positive. But the goal of it is I want to be recognized. I want people to see who I am. And I want you to shift your focus and say, you know what? Does God see who you are? Is God honoring who you are? See, Daniel always appeared. Just read the chapters before. He is always by himself, and then we have a problem. Who do we call? Not Ghostbusters. Daniel. Okay? And you know what? That's the same thing with us. That's the same thing with us. Don't run after recognition that's not from God. Don't run, hey, I'm going to do whatever at work to get recognized. I want to get to the point where people know that I'm good. And you need to ask yourself, does God know that you're good? Does God know that you're honoring Him? Does God know that you're faithful? That's enough. He will lift you up. He will exalt you. He sees that. You should not be running after accolades. Why? Because go back. Is this our home here? Living here?
No.
We have one home, right? That's why seek first the kingdom of God, and then what?
All things shall be.
All these things. You want recognition? Seek the kingdom of God. He will give you everything else. So here, the Queen Mother, she goes, oh, I know who we need to get a hold of. Who is that? Look at verse 11 and 12.
There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. In the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him chief of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and astrologers.
And 12.
Because an excellent spirit, knowledge, and understanding to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar.
Mm-hmm.
Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation.
Wow. How do you like being called by someone who doesn't know the Lord? All of these accolades. He has a spirit of wisdom and of understanding, an excellent spirit in him. He was there with your father. He interpreted. He goes, I know the person. I know the person. And let me tell you, when you stand out with God, you're going to stand out with others. when you stand out with God, you will stand out with others.
Good and bad.
Well, yeah, true. But if you take it the good side, okay, if you honor God, if you're faithful with God, people around you are going to notice. That's what you see with Daniel. And she goes, you need to call Daniel. Now let's see what Belshazzar is going to do.
I like how they introduced him. It sounded like the ring announcer at a boxing ring.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, verse 13 and 14.
Then Daniel was brought in before the king. The king answered and said to Daniel, "You are that Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah, whom the king my father brought from Judah. I have heard of you that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you."
Okay, so it doesn't sound like he knew Daniel, right? It's like, are you Daniel? You know, it doesn't sound like there was not much of a connection between this king, unlike Nebuchadnezzar, and unlike Nebuchadnezzar in his relationship with Daniel. Okay, so he's asking him, you know, this is what I heard about you. Okay, now he's gonna tell him what he did. Okay, so we're gonna read through this just so we'll know the story. So if someone can read verse 15 to 17.
And now the wise men, the enchanters, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing, and make known unto me the interpretation thereof. But they could not show the interpretation of the thing. But I have heard of thee, that thou canst give interpretations, and dissolve doubts. Now if thou canst read the writing, and make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with purple, and have a chain of gold about the neck, and shalt be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another. Nevertheless, I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation.
So basically the king tells him exactly what we read earlier, right? But what's Daniel's response?
Keep it.
You can keep it, right? You can keep it. Why? Why would Daniel tell him? Didn't he take accolades from Nebuchadnezzar before? He did. You know, he was in a high position. He took accolades. He goes, you can remember when we studied Abraham, if you were with us, and he delivered Sodom and Gomorrah, and the king of Sodom came in to give him all of this, and he goes, I don't want you to think that you enriched Abraham. I don't want anything from you. Abraham did that before. You know what happens if he takes this in this moment?
The glory goes to him and to God.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, the king is gonna think, hey, I can buy this guy. He can tell me something that's good. Are you someone that's get bought by anything? Maybe it's someone listening to me. You know, am I someone that if I get enough out of situations, I'm willing to compromise my conscience? Or is my conscience clear no matter what happens? What's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. He's like, you can keep this. You know what's the other thing too why he refused it? Did you think Daniel knew that the end of the Babylonian Empire is coming?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. What good is it to take this?
Yeah.
For a few hours? You know, he knew it's going to end. You know, what's the point of it? You know, but here is what's important is what Daniel is going to tell the king after. That's what I want you to notice here. Okay? So let's continue. Verse 18 and 19.
O thou king, the most high God, gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father the kingdom and greatness and glory and majesty. And because of the greatness that he gave him, all the peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him, whom he would slew, and whom he would kept alive, and whom he would he raised up, and whom he would put down.
But
20?
yes.
Oh, But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened so that he dealt proudly, he was deposed from his kingdom, your kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. 21.
Yes.
And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was the wild donkeys. He was fed with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the Most High God ruleth in the kingdom of men, and that he setteth up over whomsoever he will.
What is he telling him here? Remember your grandfather? He tells him the story of Nebuchadnezzar's pride. And Nebuchadnezzar basically owned everything, ruled over whatever he puts down, whatever he lifts up, whoever he wants to kill, he kills. Yes, that's what kind of a man Nebuchadnezzar was. And then his pride came to the point where God made him an ox. He was eating grass. He broke him. You know what he's telling this man? This guy? Did you learn anything from your grandfather? Did you learn anything from what God did before? So the first thing he tells him here, verse 22, but you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, although you knew all this. And I want you to think about this. You know, there is a big difference between someone who is ignorant, like Nebuchadnezzar. He was learning. He didn't know. And someone who knows and still does the wrong thing. It's biblical, by the way. Okay? Go to Matthew 11. One of the things, while you're turning there, I'll tell you this. One of the things I say all the time, you know, a lot of people like to listen to like Christian television or listen to sermons all day, and you know, so you're 10 hours listening to sermons. Here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're not planning for God to change your life through what you're listening to, everything that you're listening to is counted against you. God's going to come back and say, I told you 50 times the same thing over and over and over. So if I am not planning, may sound crazy, but if I'm not planning to obey God, but I listen to everything that He says, watch out. Because now I know what I should be doing, and I purposely say, I don't want to do it. So go to Matthew 11. Look at verse 23 and 24.
And you, Capernaum, will you be exalted to heaven? You will be brought down to Hades, where if the mighty works done in you had been done in Sodom, it would have remained until this day. But I tell you that it will be more tolerable on the day of judgment for the land of Sodom than for you.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. Capernaum is a city that Jesus lived in. Capernaum is a city that Jesus did miracles in. That city that he's talking about is a city that he stayed in. And he goes, because of your pride, knowing that I was in the midst of you. When judgment comes, the judgment that's going to come on you will be worse than Sodom and Gomorrah. Think about that. Think about Sodom and Gomorrah and what they did. And he comes to a city that he lived in, that he did miracles in, and he goes, watch out. The difference is, you knew. You knew. And you still said, I won't do it. Go to Hebrews 10. You're with me? Mm-hmm. Okay. Go to Hebrews 10.
For the law?
Hebrews 10. Verse 29. Verse 28 and 29.
man that hath set at naught Moses' law dieth without compassion on the word of 2 or 3 witnesses. Of how much more sorer punishment, think ye, shall he be judged worthy, who hath trodden under the foot the Son of God, and hath counted the blood of the covenant, wherewith he was sanctified, an unholy thing, and hath done despite unto the Spirit of grace.
So he goes, remember in the Old Testament, 2 or 3 witnesses, and then the judgment that comes on the person? And he goes, if this is the Old Testament, how much more a person knowingly, willfully, okay, steps on the blood of Christ, tramples the Son of God underfoot, count his blood of the covenant, and insults the Spirit of grace. Of how much more judgment? See, there is a big difference that God puts between someone who doesn't know and someone who knows. That's why the judgment that came on Belshazzar, remember Nebuchadnezzar, how many chances God gave him? Okay? Belshazzar had no chance. Because Belshazzar had all of this that happened in front of him, and he ignored it completely. And he said, I'm still going to do what I want to do. So over and over you see in the Bible where God says, there is a difference. There is a difference between sinning or walking the wrong way with knowledge or without knowledge. That's what you see here. Go back to Daniel. Okay? That's what you see here with Daniel. But he didn't stop there. So his first issue, so he gave him 3 points here. 3 points that Belshazzar did that basically drove God to write what he wrote on the wall. So the first one is he rejected, right? He knowingly rejected whatever he knew. Now, verse 23.
But you have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven, and the vessels of his house have been brought in before you, and you and your lords, your wives and your concubines have drunk wine from them. And you have praised the gods of silver and gold, and bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see or hear or know, but the God in whose hand is your breath, in whose are all your ways, you have not honored.
So he goes, not only you did this, but you also blasphemed God. You mocked God. You didn't care, thinking that, you know what, I'm blaspheming the God that created all of this, that gave me what I have. And not only this, you went and you worshipped idols of silver and gold and wood and stones. So he goes, Belshazzar, you did 3 things. One is you rejected the God you knew about. And you know what? Is it the same thing that's going to happen soon when Jesus comes back? Absolutely. You know, if you don't accept Christ in the time of grace we're in, when Jesus comes back and we go into the tribulation, you're not going to be able to come back. So if you don't accept him in the time of grace that we're in, you won't be able to accept him in the time of tribulation. Yes?
Is there a possibility that like the 144 is not in this room right now? That's just like a random question.
What do you mean the
The
144?
144,000
100%
that are going to be saved for the tribulation?
Well, they're all Jews, so definitely I don't think anyone here is Jewish.
In this day and
Okay,
age,
I'm not going to get into some conversation.
it's a whole topic.
Yeah. Okay? So you have to understand. So the first sin he did is he rejected.
Oh yeah, he's half Jew. He's a
Not
quarter,
Yeah.
but that's not enough.
So, you know, so the first thing he did is he rejected. The second thing he did is he's blaspheming God. Okay? And then the third thing he did is he worshipped other gods. Now look at what the words on the wall is. And I don't know how far we're going to get. Probably next time we're going to continue. Verse 25. So verse 24 and then 25.
Therefore he sent the hand that wrote the inscription. This is the inscription that was written. Mene, tekel, parson.
Mene, so he repeats the first word twice. Mene, tekel, farson. Now Daniel is gonna tell him what these words mean. So he emphasizes the first one, verse 26.
This is the interpretation of the matter. Mene, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end.
God has numbered the day. Your time is up. Belshazzar, your time is up. Your life is over. God has numbered your days. You know that God numbers our days?
Amen.
Now, how many is guaranteed tomorrow?
Nobody.
How many is guaranteed tonight?
Nobody.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing that we see written on a wall to a king that blasphemes God. The same thing that's telling us. God is saying, your days are numbered too. There will come a day, whether Jesus comes back or I go to him. There is a number of days for me. So he tells him, Belshazzar, your time is up. God is looking at you and your time is up. Okay? And then he goes, the next one, verse 27.
Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting.
Oh, wow.
What does that mean?
Weighed in the balances, okay? You know when you have those scales,
Yeah.
okay? And then you weigh in the balance and then you say, you're light, man. You're
Yeah.
light.
Yeah.
You're under judgment. Okay? So he goes, you were weighed in the balances and you were found wanted, which means you're found light. You didn't measure up. That's what he's telling him, yes.
And also maybe he's also relating to his gods because they always do like that balance and you gotta
Yeah.
pay when you on
Yeah,
the
could be.
afterlife. And it's
Yeah.
kind of like relate to him like, hey,
Yeah.
like in your own interpretation, your balances, you don't got it.
Yeah, but you know what? Is God gonna weigh certain things in our life? Go to 1 Samuel.
By the way, you're going in on it today, just so you know.
Go-